When I woke up on that early October morning, I had absolutely no idea or sense that by the end of the day, I would become an expert in dying and I would become an expert in hope. Almost instantaneously, I was flat on the floor, basically dead. And I have the or the ER uh, emergency technician's report on what happened after that. But in that moment, I found myself in a completely different dimension. So
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we're speaking with Philip Hasheider. He's had a near-death experience. I was in communication with him to get him on the show. I'm really excited to have a conversation. We've been chatting a little bit before the show, as I usually do with some of the guests, but I'm really excited to go through the experience you had, Philip, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak with your audience and explain the experience I had and how I look at it, how I understand it at this point in time. And I'm pleased to share it.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'll let you kind of speak here about what happened, but I generally start things a little bit different now than I even did when I first started the show, but I try to go just around the time frame that the near-death experience happened. So if we're looking at when the near-death experience happened, you can even go a couple of years before that, a little bit further, maybe 5 years. I'm just trying to see what your life was like around that, like what you did, what did, did you work? What were you doing in your life that kind of led up to this, and what was kind of going on around you?
Well, my wife and I have a farm here in South Central Wisconsin, and I've been a farmer all my life, and I've also done a lot of writing. Um, what happened that morning in early October was so far out of my normal day that it became a demarcation line in my life. Everything before that and everything after that morning uh, has been different. Um, when I woke up on that early October morning, I had absolutely no idea or sense that by the end of the day, I would become an expert in dying and I would become an expert in hope. Uh, at 11 o'clock in the morning, I was lying flat on our local hospital's fitness room floor, not breathing, my heart not pumping. And fortunately, there were people there who were able to resuscitate me. And, but I didn't realize a lot of things until much later. That morning started out like my typical morning here on the farm. I would walk out to our pasture and check on our 27 head of grazing beef cattle, just to make sure that everything was okay and that none of them had any physical issues that I had to attend to. And so that morning, when I walked out there, I didn't get 100, 200 feet from them. They were all lying down in the grass. And so one of them saw me. She jumped up. She perked her ears towards me, which is an alert response, usually prior to an alarm response.
Mm-hmm.
And she stood there and looked at me for a couple of seconds and then took off running across the field and stopped about 300 feet away. Well, that got the attention of all the other animals lying down, and they got up, they looked at me, and they took off running across the field and joined her. Then they stopped they all turned and looked at me. And the only thing I could think of was it's like they had seen a ghost. That
Hmm.
had never happened when I had been out with them. Not the morning before when I actually could walk amongst them and talk to them and scratch them and, just interact with them. And subsequently, it never happened again. The next time I went out there, which was about 4 or 5 days later, um, they were fine. So I that morning I noticed this change, but it didn't strike me as something I had to really worry about. So I had seen what I needed to see, and I turned around and walked back to our farmyard. Well, that morning, coincidentally, I had arranged to have a local business in our local village, which is 12 miles away, to have the tires on our car replaced. And so I had to go in for the appointment. I typically took my gym bag because if I had a chance, I would go to our hospital's rehab fitness room and do an exercise, which I had been going there for the previous 5 months to uh, try to reduce what had been a high blood pressure situation. Historically, I had always had low blood pressure, but in the previous 3, 4 months of my first visit to the rehab room, my blood pressure had mysteriously started increasing. And so my doctor suggested I try an exercise program there. So I did. And that morning driving in, I realized I was so early for the tire replacement appointment. Instead of turning right to go there, I turned left and went to our hospital's fitness area.
Hmm.
I parked my car, went downstairs, changed clothes, came back up, and said hi, good morning to the three staff people who were in the room because it was a monitored fitness area because they had rehab people in there as well. And I did some stretches and sat down to the arm curl bench and did 20 modest arm curls, nothing strenuous. I stood up next to the bench, and the strangest thing happened. I looked down at both of my forearms because they were tingling, like I had laid on them and they had fallen asleep.
Hmm.
And that was the last thing I remember for at least 8 hours that day. And so one moment, I'm standing next to this bench, looking at my forearms, and almost instantaneously, I was flat on the floor, basically dead. And I have the hospital or the ER emergency technician's report on what happened after that. But in that moment, I found myself in a completely different dimension. And from here on, I'm going to have to use human vocabulary to explain as close as I can what I experienced and what I saw and felt. Because I found I was in a dimension that used no language, no words. Any information was transmitted instantaneously and understandingly. And so, what I can explain is that I found myself floating on what I would call something akin to a raft, a small raft, just for myself. And I was floating, but I wasn't floating on water. I was floating on these energetic waves that were coming towards me. And they were passing beyond both sides of me. And not only were they coming towards me, they were passing through me. And I reached up. I remember reaching up with what I thought was my hand, or it appeared to be my hand, and realized that the waves were passing through that as well. My my hands, if you will, my whole body, if you will, was translucent.
Hmm.
And it didn't feel odd. I mean, in fact, being there, floating in this eternal dimension, as I came to understand it, was peaceful. It was welcoming. It was pure love. It was acceptance. And it was a feeling that I've not had here. If a spirit energy can have a feeling, that's what I can translate it to. And so I'm sitting there watching these waves come towards me, and I look up and I see what I can best describe as this gigantic, enormous, golden, glowing, reddish, pulsing sphere that not only was it huge, I mean, you try to find the largest word you can use for huge, and it was beyond that because it filled up the whole area to the rim of this eternal space. And from it were coming all these waves. They were like enfolding me, surrounding me with this, what I can only describe as pure love and acceptance. And when I when I looked at the surface, I could see little sparks shooting out all over the surface of this. And they were going in any number of directions that you could possibly imagine. And I realized that I was not in the fitness room anymore, but I had no idea where I was.
Right.
So my curiosity, if you can make an energetic being be curious, I looked to the side. As we understand lateral, vertical, horizontal. And what I saw, I can only describe as an infinite multitude of dimensions and universes suspended out in this eternal space. The best I can do to explain what it was like to this point is that if you take everything we know about the universe that we presently exist in, all the billions of stars, the billions of light years across and up and down, and you take all of that, the planets, the black holes, whatever it is you want, you take all that and you compress it down to, say, a single sheet of paper. And then you suspend it out here in this eternal dimension. Then you take another one and put it right next to that, and another one right next to that. Wow. And you keep going, whatever your concept of infinity or eternity is, in any direction that you want. There were all of these sheets of paper that represented universes or other dimensions. But yet each one of those had an energetic filament that reached up and it attached to this, what I'll describe as a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this golden pulsing energetic form in front of me. And it too was pulsing into each one of those. Love, acceptance, welcome. And at that moment, I realized there that what I was looking at or what I was experiencing was, okay, I'll use this term, the source of all creation, yeah. The divine creator, the God essence, if you will, pick whatever term resonates with you that denotes a supreme knowledge, love, and creator. And then it, it with these waves coming, I could reach up and actually touch this form and not get burnt up. I mean, it was glowing like it had 10 billion suns in it. It just was an enormous positive energy. And I realized, wow, I'm touching the face of God. And it did not seem odd. So I'm one who likes to know what's behind me. I mean, living on a farm, I always like to have to look back to see if I missed something. So I turned around as we understand front and back. Okay. And what I saw was best described as infinity. And that's because the emulsion of eternity acted like a magnifying glass, so that the farther I looked back, the clearer everything became. I had actually seen the edge of eternity, which there is no edge.
Mm-hmm.
So when I turned back around, I had a better understanding of where I was. And then during this time, I at this point, I did not know that I had died. It never felt like I had left anywhere, but I was here. So, I was just here. I was just there. I was just me. Back during this time, according to the printout time records of the emergency technicians, it was during this time that there were a dozen people back at that fitness center trying to revive me. They were working furiously because I interviewed each one of the dozen people that were there later on when I was trying to understand what happened, what they were doing. I didn't know that. But even if I had known that, I couldn't call them and tell them, "Hey, don't bother. I really like where I am. This is really great. Why would I want to go back?" Because it was so welcoming and accepting. It was all love. Um, I couldn't tell them that if they didn't revive me, they shouldn't worry about it. And then, in less than a blink of an eye, I was out of this dimension. And I assumed, according to their timeline, that that's when they were able to restart my heart. So I left that dimension. And later on, I mean, when I was starting to realize what had happened, I realized I had taken the longest trip I had ever taken in 6 minutes.
Wow.
But I came back with an experience that has taken me a long time to understand and even longer to explain to anybody. But yet, on top of all that, it would be another 8 months before I would be given the answer as to why I came back. And that was my search for that span of 8 months, trying to understand why my collapse happened, where it did, when it did, at that exact point in time, with all the help available, and not 1 hour earlier, when I was out in our pasture with our cattle, and there would have been nobody that would have found me for 6, 7, 8 hours, because my wife Mary had a full-time job, so she was not there. And even if somebody had found me, the nearest ambulance would be a 10-minute drive to get to our place, and then they wouldn't even know where I was.
Mm.
So if it had happened there, we would not be having this conversation. But because it happened where it did, it raised a lot of questions as why. Why there? Why in that spot with all that help? But it would be another 8 months before I would understand that. And
Wow.
and I can talk about that. So after I went into the hospital on Monday and I came out on Thursday. Absolutely no damage to my heart. They found two blockages. They put two stents in, and my blood pressure immediately dropped to my normal levels. Uh, the only residual effects I had were the medications they put me on. They wanted to make sure that my blood pressure stayed low, so I was given blood pressure medicine, and that really caused a lot of problems. I I really had a tough time navigating that. Plus the fact I was trying to understand what happened to me. I mean, I had understood some of these things fairly quickly after I recovered, but it wasn't until 8 o'clock that night. Okay, this happened about 11 in the morning, and it wasn't until about 8 o'clock that night that I finally realized something had happened. And I know that because my wife was Mary was standing at the end of the gurney rubbing my feet, and it didn't make any sense because she had left to go to work. I had said goodbye, given her a hug, and now she's here rubbing my feet.
Hmm.
Our son and our daughter were to the left of me, observing. There was some guy with apparently a clipboard asking me questions, which was really loud. I mean, everything was so loud at that point. And I had no idea what he was doing. And I remember distinctly looking up and seeing this clock on the wall, and it said 8 o'clock. And I said, that can't be possible. And he looked at me, or he asked, why can't that be possible? I said, well, time doesn't run backwards, at least not here. There was a pause, and he said, well, it's 8 o'clock at night. I said, no, it can't be. I had just realized it was 11 o'clock in the morning. That was the last
Right.
memory I had. And now it's 8 o'clock at night. Where'd the 8 hours go?
Hmm.
And so it was my quest to try to understand what happened during those 8 hours.
Hmm.
And it it took a long time. I I refer to it as an interdimensional confusion because it was like I had one foot still in this eternal dimension, and here I am stuck here.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that as a knock on my family, my wife, Mary, who was a great support through all this. But that experience was so great. Why did I want to be here anymore? That was a real tough one. Um, and so it took a long time to fully integrate and understand what was happening. So after I got home, things started coming back to me. So I would make little notes because it was something I wanted to think about. And finally, with being on the blood pressure medicine, I mean, I couldn't hardly function. Mary wouldn't let me outside to operate any farm equipment. She would go out to the pasture with me if I wanted to look at the cattle because she was afraid I might not make it back or I might wander off somewhere. I can laugh about it now, but it was pretty serious. The minute I collapsed, everything got dumped on her lap.
Hmm.
Everything. The cattle, the farm, the finances, explaining to my family and friends what happened, and monitoring me at home, trying to make sure I'd wake up in the morning. So she had her own. Anyone who has had a near-death experience, such as mine or other people, it's not just the person who's affected. It ripples out, and it affects family, friends, and a lot of people. I have been told by a number of people that there were others they had talked to about their experience, and they just kind of either didn't want to hear it, couldn't understand what it was. Well, how could they? The only person who can understand the experience fully is the one who's had it.
Mm-hmm.
Mary could understand some of it because she had had her own experiences in a different way. But the person who has it is looking at it from this direction, and the person who is observing this person who had it is looking at it from a completely different direction. So there were challenges. And it was about a year and a half ago that Mary and I were at a IANS conference, and one of the speakers talked about the divorce rate of couples who one who's had a near-death experience and the other doesn't. And the divorce rate is up to 80%.
Yeah.
And it's understandable because the other person sees the change in the person who had the NDE, which Mary did, because all of a sudden she said there were things that you had thought were important that absolutely made no difference to you anymore. And it was hard to navigate that sort of thing. Well, this went on for 8 months as we tried to renegotiate our existence together. And I was really oblivious to it because I was still half the time in that dimension, just thinking about it or feeling it. I could still feel it, even though I was here in a physical body. Well, generally, I would come down for breakfast from our second floor bedroom, and I had to navigate 17 steps around a corner. And I'd plop myself into the chair, and that morning, that's what I did. And Mary was sitting at the other end of the table, and she had a notepad in her hand, which she typically didn't have when I came down. And she waited until I got settled. And then she said, well, do you want to hear what you said last night? And I said, I don't remember saying anything. She said, oh, but you did. And I grabbed my pad, and I thought it might be something that I needed to talk about in the morning. And I said, okay, so what happened? She said, well, you sat up in bed and you were mumbling to yourself, and I couldn't make out what you were saying. And then you stopped. And then you started to shake your head from side to side, saying, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. She said she asked me, what don't you believe? I told her the reason I came back. And she asked, well, what was the reason that you came back? And she said, I told her the reason I came back was to be a conduit of hope for those who don't have any and don't think there is any. And then there was this pause. And I said, anything else? She said, no. He laid back down and went to sleep. But the moment she said that, that was one of those realizations of why I returned. I'm not the message. I'm the messenger. I don't want people to confuse that. But because of her being prescient enough to write that down I had the answer as to why it happened, where it did, when it did, and not an hour earlier out in our pasture. And that was very important to me. And I'm eternally grateful for her to have mentioned it. I mean, she could have just said nothing and just blew it off, but she did. She told me about it, and that that opened up like a doorway for me, because then I was able to really explore the things that were coming to me at that time and not be afraid of it, because it was going to be part of what I needed to witness to others. Not in the religious sense. This has nothing to do with religion. It's about the spiritual connection we have with the divine creator. And we all do. Whether anyone wants to believe that or not, that's their choice. However, um, when you pass, you will realize that that is what our connection is. So it was an exceptional, extraordinary experience. And like I said, I don't think I'm done with the full experience yet. I think there is still more that I will understand, uh, still more that I will recognize, which leads me, if I may, which leads me to a question I have been asked a number of times. And the first one who asked it was an emergency room nurse at our local hospital. The director had heard about my incident at the fitness center and came to ask, well, called and asked if she could come sit with me at our house to talk about it. And I said, sure. So then she invited me to, if I would be willing to talk to the emergency room nurses to explain my experience. And I said, sure. So that was really the first time I stepped out and was trying to formulate my experience into a verbal expression to other people who are, in the medical profession. One of the questions that I was asked after I got done was, do you think you could have dreamt all that? And I said, yeah, that's possible. But I don't believe that, because I'm pretty certain that everybody who's going to view this probably has had dreams, and generally during the night. So when you wake up in the morning, you may remember snippets of it. You may remember, segments of it.
Mm-hmm.
You may remember who was in it. But generally, you don't get the whole picture or the whole dream. Maybe some people do. Okay. But for me, I know that my experience is not a dream, because every time I think about it, I can recall the whole sequence as I have realized it to this stage. Now, again, there may be more that's going to be coming later on, somewhere down the road. But from what I had experienced, it stays the same. And not only does it stay the same, the feeling I had while I was there as a spirit energy wells up within me while I'm sitting here thinking about it. So why are those two things attached to each other? So I know my experience is true. It's true for me. Now, again, people can take it or leave it. That's their choice. But I'm satisfied that, and I've been given the assurance by, I think we all have guides. We all have, some people may refer to them as guardian angels or angels, but I think there are spirits around us all the time. They just can't interact with us while we are here. But the information that I had received about my experience being true because I asked out loud, was this true? And I was given an answer, yes, it was. I needed to know that because I did not want to be deceived. And I certainly did not want to deceive myself. And I certainly, on top of that, did not want to deceive anyone else who might hear it and offer them a false narrative. So again, it comes back to take it or leave it. I'm not going to be offended one way or another. This is my experience as I understand it. And I have no reason to make this stuff up because I don't have that great of an imagination. I mean, this was,
Right.
beyond anything I could sit and write. I'm not a fantasy writer, and this was not a fantasy. This was very real to me. So besides all that, there's a couple of things that I've learned or understood from that experience. And one is that our bodies are more than the sum of its part. When I was standing next to that arm curl bench, I had all the same body parts, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, a heart, lungs. I had all the same body parts there as I had when I was lying dead on the floor, except for that one little thing, that inner essence, that inner spark, the soul essence is what I'll use. That had gone. And that was me in that eternal dimension. Mm-hmm. That was the truest essence of me, just like it's the truest essence of you, Joe, or anyone who looks at this. We all have that within us. Now, we have a personality, ego, structure, but our divine essence, our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it, is what lasts forever because it will leave this body and it will go on to another expression. Mm-hmm. I mean, these bodies are not made to last forever. I don't care what they're going to try to do to make you live eternally, physically. I don't see that as happening because this is a human form that serves as a vehicle to move our true self around as we learn our lessons here. And that's why we come. My understanding, and again, this is my understanding, it doesn't have to be anybody else's, but if anyone's willing to just examine it, that's all I ask. My understanding is that at one point, I was one of those little sparks that came out of that source of all creation, just mm-hmm. like you were one of those sparks, and anyone else who was listening to this, they were a spark at one time. I mean, there is no time. We just are. We do have a time structure in this planetary system because that's how we navigate our existence here. But at one time, I was that creation of a spark, and I don't believe this is my first existence. I think I've been, well, mainly because we've had eternity to explore all of what I had seen in various iterations. But my understanding is that at some point, my soul, my inner sense, decided it wanted to come here to learn. And so basically got off the energetic superhighway, took the off-ramp, and came down and wanted to enter this lower density, this lower energetic plane of existence. So I chose my parents. I was born of them. I was raised by them. I've now had over 74 years of existence here. And I know that when I do leave, I'm going to get back on that energetic superhighway on ramp, and I'm going to go down and have another experience somewhere. I can't tell you what it is because I don't know myself. But I'll come back and tell you if that happens.
Right.
But that's the same with everyone else. The people you have been most close to in your life, your family, whatever, whoever you've lost or felt you've lost, they are not lost. They are just somewhere else. And so that is a portion of the hope that I want to explain to people as I see it. That this is not the end. Yeah, we're here for, whatever number of years we have the privilege of being here for. And the the things that we are really, if you want to have what are we charged to do here while we're here, is to learn lessons, good, bad, or indifferent, take them with us, to uh, recognize the divinity in everyone. Those you meet, those you don't meet, those you like, those you can't stand. We are charged with recognizing the divinity in everyone who's here. And if we did that, if everyone on this planet did that, we wouldn't have any wars, we wouldn't have any conflicts, because we would be accepting of the divinity that was given to that person from the creator source.
Mm-hmm.
So we are all children of God. Again, this is not a religious mantra. We are all children of that God essence. But so that to this point, that's how I understand this. And people can say, well, that's a little Pollyanna of you, but it's not. If you think about it, there are going to be signposts in your life where you can look and say, this was a learning point for me. Maybe I didn't like it. I mean, maybe it didn't turn out as I expected, but uh, and it's since last fall that I did have the realization and the explanation of how we are created, because time, eternal time, uh, is such an odd concept for a human brain to wrap itself around. Because what is no time? It's just is. We just move from a moment to moment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we don't mark, time is not marked in an eternal dimension. Basically, this system that we're in, uh, basically, it's just surrounded by eternal time. We just happen to carve out a portion of it to navigate this lower density dimension. So if I were going to leave anyone with something today, it's that you can be afraid if you want. That's a choice. But you don't have to, because fear is an energy that cannot rise to that eternal dimension. It's too dense. It
Mm-hmm.
will not resonate. Fear feeds on itself. It's an insatiable energetic form because it wants to create more. It wants to eat you up, and it doesn't care about you. So to understand that is to resist the fear. And by doing that, you basically banish it from your sphere of life. Now, it's not always easy to do. Um, since my since my experience in that eternal dimension has been much easier for me, but I had seen it in a completely different way. I mean, I'm not afraid of physically dying. It's not that I want to do it tomorrow, and I'm not suggesting other people do it tomorrow just so they can experience it themselves, because you may not come back.
Right.
But that's okay too, from my opinion, because you'll have learned what lessons you need here. And the one thing I haven't quite understood yet, no, I'll be very frank about this, is I don't quite understand the alchemy that's involved from having that spirit energy experience in that eternal dimension, and then being able to transport it across time and space and have it reintegrate in my body so that I can remember it. I mean, it's like all that information was tattooed to my soul when it came back, and
Hmm.
it's here, it's inside me. I don't know how else to explain it, but maybe I don't need to understand the process that evolves for that
Hmm.
to happen, just to know that it does. So
Wow.
I'm sorry, I've taken
No.
taken up all your time. I just
No, I've loved all of this. So, and actually, I want to. There's so many things I want to say here, but I want to first. I always, I appreciate you telling the story and the experience that you had. It's your life and it's your experience, so I'm appreciative of it. I'm sure the audience is as well. I We'll do some rapid fire questions because I have a lot. I have a lot. And just to right away bounce off that what you just mentioned is how the memory came back. And I've started to kind of just over conversation start to realize I don't think we understand memory the way that it quite is. I think maybe we get a little bit caught up with memory and how it works. This is my own opinion. I'm no doctor, but we look at memory as if it's all stemming from the brain. And of course, we can judge that based on, maybe knowing someone that has goes through dementia and they forget who everybody is in this world and everything, right? And what I'm starting to feel is that, um, how can I go with this? Actually, I'm going to jump ship a little bit and go to something like ayahuasca or something, some form of psychedelic someone can take, and it goes in it goes through your body and it affects your whole body. And these people have spiritual experiences at times. And you go, well, how are they having an experience if their brain is shut down? Right? What is creating those memories? Like what's going on, right? So it's almost like I sometimes think if we can start to explore what happens as the physical brain starts to kind of go into disease or whatever it does, um, that possibly not all our memory is just coming from our brain. It's within us. Like it's almost like your soul like you mentioned, I think we mentioned this before we talked, is 4 GB of memory or whatever it is. That that memory is shifting around and it's coming back and forth, right? Like there's something more to us, but we haven't explored that enough. We just all go physical in science, that everything's just this memory within our brain. And so until we start to actually dive into that, I think we're completely confused as to where this memory comes from. But okay, I'm gonna go. So what I'm going
okay.
to do is this is the fun part for me because with this one I wrote down a lot. I have about 3 pages of different things, but I'm going to pick and choose what kind of comes to me right away. Um, you mentioned when you first were in the different dimension and you were using no words or language, you were floating. I just wanted to know when that first happened. I know some of these questions might seem silly to ask, but was there a lot of space around you? Like if you were to look in your room right now and you see space in your room, like how much space is here? What did it, did you notice more? Was it more spacious? Like was it enormous? Like how would you describe the space around you?
I've used the concept of being in the biggest amphitheater I had ever seen. I mean, it was open. It was just open. And again, when I realized when I turned around that I could see the edge of eternity, that's a long distance. I
Hmm.
mean, again, eternal is a word when uh, that humans, I think, struggle with understanding what that concept means. So, in answer specifically to your answer, it was spacious enough to embrace all of these infinite dimensions and universes that I saw, but yet confined enough that I could actually see them
Okay.
while I was there.
So it didn't, yeah, it didn't feel like you're just in outer space and it never ended. There was kind of like a feeling of being able to at least witness what was around you,
What was close around me, yes,
close around you. But
and
there was a feeling of infinite
yes, yes, that
possibility in
this
space.
continued on in all
Okay.
directions that we understand directions
Mm-hmm.
and where it went.
Okay.
One thing that I typically can't fit into a discussion, but I will now, is the tones I heard.
Hmm.
At first, I thought it was a deep hum, um, not like a horn, but just a deep hum. And I realized then that what I was hearing were an infinite number of tones going up and down. And at that time, I realized that there were tones. I kept seeing all of these sparks come back in, not leaving the surface of this God essence. They were coming back in and floating with me. It wasn't until those tones that I saw that. And remembering that once I was here in recovering, it was like an international airport with all of them leaving the surface of this God essence and others coming back in. So to me, my understanding of it at this point is that the tones were like a beacon calling all of those entities that had passed whatever existence that they had been in from all over these infinite universes and dimensions back to the creator. And that from there, I assume they, like me, they left and went on somewhere else. But it was like a almost like a homing beacon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a rough interpretation of what it was.
I can envision it, and maybe because I'm a audible person, I've always been an audible person being a musician. So I can hear almost like the yeah, like I can actually hear like it in and I can kind of witness what you're saying. Um so that's really fascinating. You it I'm just gonna tell you a little bit of how I was writing as you were explaining the because you also answered questions before I had to ask them, which was really fascinating because you mentioned it that you saw sparks coming out. You mentioned the sphere. Actually, I want to say something about that too. One of the questions you were asked shortly after whatnot was if this was a dream, right? If this was a dream,
Mm-hmm.
and you were like, oh, well, and you explain the way you explain it very well, the way you explained it. But I can tell you from my um, short-lived research and near-death experiences, compared to a lot of people out there already, that there are, yes, people's NDEs have their own um, flavor to them. But there are certain aspects of the near death experience that not all, but many of them seem to have. The sphere, this source, God energy in a sphere like feeling of pulsating energy. I've heard that. I've heard that a number of times, and from people who knew nothing about near death experiences. Maybe were like grew up religious, weren't told of a sphere. They were told of a man on a throne in the clouds, that kind of thing. Like there was no idea of what that even means. So the reason I bring that up is unless we're all tapping into a same kind of dream, then that to me gives me um, more validity to your experience because you're telling me something that I've already heard from people who don't know you, who had different experiences. Um, I again, I don't understand the concept of the customization of our NDEs like within us because we are part of God's source energy, so we can probably have whatever experience comes to us. But I would say there are tidbits I get within these NDEs that I could probably go through all my notes and put in a little red star by and say, "Oh, heard that one, heard that one, heard that one." And so that to me, you know, kind of gives me more validation from the source of the stance of it not being a dream. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. And why would we each have an identical experience?
Mhm.
Because while we're here, we're all individuals living different lives. So we all have our own individual experience here. And so when you leave or and come back, I mean, why would everyone's experience be the same? Because we're different. We're unique individuals here. And I think once we leave, we are unique individuals when we leave. We are the thought of God put into a crystallized form, which becomes our soul.
Mhm.
And why wouldn't that be different from someone else?
Mhm.
Now, I think once we leave that God source, that God essence, that all of a sudden we are now separate and we are gifted free will. So that means our soul can go where it wants, when it wants to do, learn whatever lessons it meet, wants to, without judgment, because we are already part of that God essence, the purity of love, and we're taking that as ambassadors, if you will, emissaries, and we're wherever we go. And we forget that once we're here
Mhm.
because of our social conditioning.
Mhm.
So when a baby is born, yeah, it cries, but it also cries because its tether to that eternal dimension and that God essence has been severed, and now it has dropped down into this lower density dimension that it will have to navigate.
Mhm.
So one of the challenge, this is a little offshoot, one of the challenges with finding words to explain an experience, and perhaps others who have had NDEs had the same struggle I had. Words are so loaded with history and past usage, so that I mean every word that we use has a certain width, certain length, and a certain depth.
Mhm.
But yet attached to it is the energetic expression of what that word originally started as. However, over generations and millennia, it's gotten layered with everybody's else's uh, expression. So you can have a word like love, and you can have a word like hate. They have two completely different energetic expressions, and you can feel it.
Mhm.
When you say you love someone, you have a different expression, a different feeling than when you say, I hate you.
Mhm.
So words become charged in
Hmm.
our daily conversations.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and I was gonna mention because it it goes into one of the other questions I was gonna ask you. But I did want to still mention when you said you saw sparks coming from this. First, I thought, was that the sun he's seeing? And I've thought that before, but it's not the sun. Um, you saw the sparks. And then the next question I said, is that souls? Creation of souls? That's what I wrote down. So when you said that later,
Mm-hmm.
I went, okay, there's that. Um, you also you mentioned that it was hard to find the same feeling here. And I was trying to figure out, well, if you were to figure of if there's any feeling you can have here, what is the closest?
Good question. The closest that I would be able to say is the feelings of love I have for my wife, my family members, my friends,
Mm,
because that's an emotion that will resonate wherever you go. So that is the closest I can get. I mean, there initially there were days that I just wanted to walk away from this life and go back. Fortunately, I had a good enough support system uh, to really want to stay. And now I'm glad I did because I think I can offer something to someone who needs to hear that this is not the end.
mhm,
Now, I need to explain. I before my own experience, I had no idea what a near-death experience was. I had never read about any of them. I had never seen any videos about them. Uh, so when I was writing out my notes to try to understand my experience, I specifically stayed away from all of anyone else's experience so that I could focus on mine and make sure it was as pure as I could make it from my perspective. And that's just me. And it comes back to, well, everyone has their own NDE experience. Some people see the family members, some people see a religious figure, some people see angels. I can't say at this point that I saw any of them. Now, that doesn't make my experience invalid or theirs invalid, but I don't think we are going to all have the same experience.
mhm,
And I, that's just my understanding of it all.
mhm,
But if I can take a step to address your question about the spark coming out being the soul,
mhm.
my understanding is yes. That at one time that was you, one time that was me. At some point, time is irrelevant. It happened. So what happened last fall was a realization of how this works, at least in my understanding. Now, again, it's my understanding. It doesn't have to be anybody else's, but they can look at it, accept it or dismiss it. Just think about it. So, as I understand the process, there's within this golden, glowing God essence, there is the energetic energy of the Creator within it. And at some point, the Creator, God, has a thought. And that thought then is crystallized and fused. And if you will, I'll use a human term, embedded with the creator DNA. And then that spark is released. And that's what I saw coming off of these. And again, once it is released from the God essence sphere, or whatever one wants to imagine it to be, it's gifted free will. And it can go where it wants, when it wants, exist in what form it wants, but it always has that creator essence, the God essence, the love that it takes with. And once it lands here, then you're subjected to social pressures, social expressions, and everything else. So,
Mhm.
but deep within everyone here is that soul essence, that DNA of the creator, that love, and that's what we forget because we've been layered by society's crud.
If you, the
I'm
perfect word
struggling to
for it.
find,
No.
yeah, I'm struggling to find a
Yeah.
very complimentary term,
Hmm.
but that's what happens. I mean, it's a lower density dimension that we're in. So,
Right.
uh, but I don't think you can, um, as I said, we need a physical body to navigate this level of density.
Hmm.
Um, and I do think, like I said, that there are entities around us that we may see, may not see,
Hmm.
but I don't think they can influence us. We can make our own decisions because we were gifted free will. So while we're here, we're making our own choices.
Hmm.
And if people say, well, how do you say that? Because this happened to me. Well, what led up to it? Why did it occur in your life at that point in time? I mean, what choices were made? I mean, we can go around blaming each other for bad things that happened to us, but why did that happen in the first
Right.
place? That's a whole different discussion. But so that's my understanding of how we're created and how
Cool.
we get to where we are now. And again, that's my understanding that hey, nobody has to believe it if they don't want to. But as I mentioned to you before we came on, sooner or later, once they leave here, they're going to find out that it's going to be some approximation of that.
Hmm. Wow, no, I appreciate you explaining it that way. I mean that's kind of what I was feeling from it. I mean it goes in the sense of saying that we are part of God. If we're the creation part of God, then that makes sense. We're bringing on her, its DNA, and we're becoming this entity that we are here. I was going to say you mentioned a few times, we have free will and all these things, and I don't go down this road too often in things, but at one point in the when you were explaining everything, you were talking about if we recognized our true divinity, um, the world would be a better place. And what came to me right away is it's probably one of the only reasons that I wish we would have some type of contact. And I say it like that because I don't, obviously, I don't go, everyone's got their own belief systems and everything, but I truly don't believe we're the only thing that exists. So if there's other entities that exist in this dimension, there is a possibility that some of them have advanced, beyond where we are right now, and they may have a even closer or better understanding possibly of what we truly are. And if we were helped with that, I think it would really change things very quickly here because it would be kind of a shock wave go through our entire human evolution, because all of a sudden the things that we thought mattered no longer would matter as much. There will still be people who will still live their lives the way they will, but I think that it would create a ripple effect. And it's when people talk about this stuff, I have people contact me all the time. Oh, I want to talk about this type of stuff, whether it's UAPs, UFOs, aliens, whatever you want to call them, the other beings that they've been in contact with. Um, I'm not completely against it. There's a lot of woo-woo around it, but um, the idea is that we have free will and that's why they don't interfere. But then I think, but I sometimes wish they would because it makes things a lot more difficult through our own personal evolution. What do you feel around that?
Well, I think I'll answer it this way. If if you think about it from this perspective, we are already living in eternity. We
Mhm.
just happen to be on a planetary system that uh, chops it up into bits so that we can keep time schedules and make sure we're on time to do a podcast interview and that sort of thing. If you look at your grandparents, your great grandparents, um, in their lives, and what their concept of eternity was, would be likely something that was beyond after they died here physically. That would be their concept of eternity. Well, guess what? We're here. So, in that essence, we are living in their eternity already.
Mhm.
So
Hmm.
we could talk about animal consciences because our cattle had it. They saw something that was unusual. They either didn't recognize me, uh, they didn't understand what they saw, or they did see something behind me that just
Yeah.
was out of the ordinary that they did not know what to do with. I can't say because I can't ask any of them, but I do know the animal world has a consciousness of its
Hmm.
own.
Hmm.
The plant world does. We just think we're too sophisticated to even think that's possible. But if you slow down and you think about it, everything has a consciousness.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so,
No, you're not the first to say that as well. I've had deep conversations with some very in-depth NDEers around animals and how there's a difference between us and them, but it still has a consciousness around it and a different energy wave. And
mm,
there's been a few shows that I've talked deeply about that. And I, as you talk, more comes to me, and I'm like, okay, I got to get through some of these because I went, oh, I got another question now.
well,
Really a
yeah,
quick one is heaven a different dimension then?
well, I think a heaven is a human construct. It's a way for, again, this was what was written down in early texts. Uh, it's a way to understand a dimension beyond our own.
Hmm.
And because the teaching was to try to get everybody on the same page, the uh, dogma, if you will, becomes solidified in a certain concept of that term.
Okay.
And uh, well, you can have heaven here on earth. It's just total love. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what the eternal dimension is total love, acceptance, welcoming, peacefulness. And why wouldn't you want that? So um,
And the way
we
that you
we
would,
could we could really go down this
yeah.
path. But
Well,
you can,
I remember the part where you were talking about the sheets and how it was infinite and all the dimensions there's infinite amounts of these dimensional places and all this. And I mean, to me, that just feels like the possibilities are endless anyways.
mm,
So
mm,
there could be existences that are heavenly that we can't
mm,
even fathom. And this is why some people go and they try to explain it. I get a lot of people who go to heaven, quote unquote, and they see the trees and the birds and they see the everything's alive. Like if you were to look at when they come back, they're depressed because they look out at a field and it's not alive the way they've seen it in this other realm. Confusion.
well, that's interesting. You see this picture?
Mhm.
This is was taken by Mary, my wife, at a sunset on her farm. When I was during my recovery after being out of the hospital, I kept looking for the color that I saw emanating in this golden glowing goddesses.
Mhm.
I tried to find it here, and Mary can attest to this. She'd be driving, and I'd be looking around for the color. And the closest that I've been able to come is this.
Mhm.
And, and this is not a promotion. I just need to show you as an example. This is the cover of my
Oh yeah.
book. And this and that one, this was done by an artist in London who didn't know my story, as far as I know. And he came up with this cover design. And it,
Wow.
so there is something about the, what do you want to call it, synchronicity between the image and the energetic expression of it in in our feelings or in our mind.
Why do you think that the sunlight would have been that one thing that is the same? Because I mean, when you talk about that big pulsating light, to me, the first thing that came to me is our sun, is like the sun, right? Because it's the only thing
Mhm.
that makes sense to me from what we know. Like, you don't believe in any way you were at the sun.
No, no,
No.
I
Okay.
don't, because the sun is part of this universal system.
So maybe the sun
So,
is what God, we, us, have created to represent something close to that, to give us some sort of, like, I always look at everything as,
mm,
you know what I'm
well,
saying? Like it's
yeah,
coming down from something. So
I think
a
humans,
reminder.
yeah, I think humans naturally try to ascribe certain things so that they can understand.
Mm, okay.
And I think that's natural,
Hmm.
because if you can't understand it, then either you're not inquisitive to look further or you're afraid of it. And so being able to look at the sun as an object or an expression, because it provides life here.
Hmm.
I mean, except for uh, 6 inches of topsoil, some rain, and sunlight, none of us would be here. So
Hmm.
it's those three things, and being on a farm, I mean, that all resonates with me very much, because it's our livelihood, it's our life, and we need to integrate that. But the color, coming back to the color, was what I was trying desperately to find.
Mm.
And I don't know why, unless it had to do with a confirmation of some sort as to that's what I saw. But
Wow.
I was not outside when this happened. I was indoors.
Hmm. Right.
So it couldn't have been the sun I was seeing.
It could be the same reason why so many people are fixated on sunrises and sunsets. There's probably you talk about memory. Maybe memory comes in there and we go, oh, there it is. It comes back to us.
Well,
I, yeah. Well, I was gonna ask you also because this is a big one that I've had with people that, people lose individuals and it's hard. And I have a big star beside this question. And it was, a few times you talked about how, you'd go back onto that kind of spiritual superhighway next, and who knows where you go. You go to the next existence. It could be in any realm, whatever it is. And that when you were there, you weren't thinking about Philip, you were just there. And then, as time went on, then maybe that started to come online as you were about to reemerge back to this human existence. But none of us want to feel forgotten once we've lost someone. So if we've lost someone, I think majority would like to think that their mother, father, grandparent is watching over us, that there's some sort of because we connect to other humans. We connect, that's part of the human existence. So the question I wrote down with a sad face, and I put, so do we just forget each other? Are we all forgotten? Do they forget us? And that's just, I'm wondering what your feelings are around that.
no, I think we are remembered for eternity. I think we, now again, this is my belief
Mhm.
from what I've experienced, and others don't have to agree with it, okay? But no, I think that because we are created as as a portion of the God essence, we will remember everything, and we will remember who we belong to here, but we'll also remember who we belong to in other existences. And to not believe that it can be the power and expression of a God essence towards us, that we are not lost. No one is lost. Physically, yes, because this is not to last forever. But we will recognize our family members once we leave here,
Mhm.
because even now, our divine self, our core self, can recognize another core existence in another person, the divinity in another person. We choose not to want to remember or engage with those we don't care for, but yet that energy exchange between two divine creations can change the physical expression of what people are doing. That I believe that. We just ignore it, or we don't choose to want to do that. We want to have our own biases. We want to have our own beliefs. We want to have our own agendas because that makes us somehow feel better.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Does that help?
That helps a lot. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to that, like I mentioned, there's something that within our memory, like there's obviously, I'm going to call it soul memory.
Yeah.
Because again, we're always trying. So if our soul memory is having this existence and there's this imprint of this life in 2026, as soon as we leave it, we've got that imprint of that life and it's now stored within that soul memory and it
Mhm.
goes to the next. And yes, maybe we reincarnate somewhere else in a different, maybe the same thing happens where we're forgetting. For some reason, we forget here. From what I've been told, I've had other NDEers tell me they've explored their other lives, that they were on different dimensional
Mhm.
places, different planets, they could explore it. And some of those, the memory stayed intact. The soul memory stayed intact within the incarnation. It wasn't part of the learning in that incarnation, if you will. What in this lower dimension, for whatever reason, we decide to come here and completely forget who we are. Um, Maybe to remember. I don't know. I don't know the whole purpose. I'm going to ask you that question really soon as we wrap this up. But as to like what the purpose is, like what are we doing? But I do have this feeling like other incarnations, possibly we know, like we are having this existence, whatever that is, not the human existence, but somewhere else.
Mhm.
But we also know we are part of the divine God. We are part of something. We're almost like that cord's plugged in and we can see it, but we can't
Mhm.
see that here. We're learning to. We're trying to, but the physical realm in this dimension seems to be a bit of a blinder. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because we're not in that upper, higher dimension. We're
Right.
we're navigating between a lower density here and a higher energetic level there that does not accept fear. It does not
Mhm.
accept negative
That's a good point.
emotions, hate. It does not accept war. I mean, it's like they're all bound up in a dense fear is another thing. They're all bound up in their own little package, and it's so dense that it's like putting a stone at the top of a lake. It's going to drop
Right.
because it cannot possibly exist at that level.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. The way you just said that. So negative emotions, negative feelings, and just negative energy doesn't uh exist. So it can't you can't plug in because the negative
Well,
is keeping us stuck down here.
it does exist, but only at this level.
Right. Okay. That
I
makes
mean,
sense.
if
So
if
yeah.
if everything is created by God, then so is fear and negative energies.
Hmm.
But there are so low that they cannot rise to the level of a divine
Right.
creation.
Right. Wow.
It's kind of like now. I need to explain to those who have a religious vent on this. There is no condemnation in that eternal dimension. There's no hell. There's no gnashing of teeth. There's no, what do you want to call sin? That's acknowledged. Again, those are all human constructs. And they'll say, well, it's in the Bible or the Quran or wherever. But who wrote those? Those were humans. And they were infusing those words with their own ideas and energetic level. And I'm not going to pick a religious one
Hmm.
at all. I'm just saying that if we are going to create a box, we choose the God we want to have. And we choose a God that aligns with our biases and our beliefs more so than anything else. So if we're going to create a box for the God we want to pick, we're putting it into a small package
Hmm.
rather than allowing the expression of an eternal source of love in creation to be what guides us.
Mm. Wow. I'm glad you brought up the hell part. I don't get that conversation too often, but I think it ties in everything we're talking about with the energy and lower vibrational energy. Yes, we have fun with it when you look at like Halloween and the different celebrations people have with different things. I mean, I think that's part of the human experience, but I think we're all trying to raise our vibration at the same time and
I
move
hope
into
so.
that. I we ha as I've loved talking to you. I have to wrap it up, but I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you really quickly, if you could let me know a little bit about more about your book or how people contact you. I wanted to get that piece of
Okay.
information on here. And also, if you could finalize this conversation briefly with if it's so beautiful over there, and it is, you had this experience, what our main purpose as to why we come and do this crazy thing down here in this lower dimension.
Okay. First of all, okay, here comes a sales pitch. Whether people want to buy it or not, that's fine. 6 Minutes in Eternity. It's available on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's an audio book, which a friend of mine in Philadelphia, Charlie Wyrick, the third, uh, did the audio. Great, great job. I'm really pleased with it. Uh, if people would like to write, they can get me at philiphasheiderbooks at gmail.com, or I'm on Facebook at P. Hasheider Books.
Perfect. That's great. I'll make sure I put that on all the and I know I always love that, whether people are going to buy or not. It's not even about that. It's about
Well,
that's your
no,
life's work, and it's I honor. I'm a musician, so I have albums. People can listen to it, but now they can go on Spotify and get it for free. But it's like it's kind of a I'm
yeah,
out of touch with that now. But it's still your this story and expanded. Like we have, I try to get this in within an hour. We definitely went over it, but you know people want to dig in more, that's where they go. They find a little more
yeah,
information
yeah.
on it. So I
yeah.
appreciate that. And yeah, and then and why do we do this? What's the purpose of this whole charade? I'll call it.
We, okay, we are here to recognize the divinity in every other person. Those we meet, those we don't meet, those we like, those we can't stand, the person in driving in the car next to us. Um, that's the reason we're here, is to recognize the divinity in everyone else, because we all come from the same source. So we are all alike.
Wow.
Secondly, that hope is a pathway on which we can all walk in this journey that we are taking here. And I would say that to me would sum up pretty much what I need
Hmm.
to say today.
Oh, I
I
love
mean,
that.
I have
Yeah,
a lot more, but that's okay.
for sure. But no, you know what though? I've done, like I said, this is, I don't know whether or not this will be the 200th episode. And out of those, maybe 150 or 90 years. I don't know. I'd have to really do the numbers, but I always find it fascinating when I ask that final question because I think I'm going to get the same answer every time. And I don't. I don't get the same answer every time. I get they all have a similar energy about them, the answer. But it proves to me, and yours is the first I've heard it the way you said it, to see the divinity in other people. So you're really looking outward at the whole, which is really, I love that. I I think I'll remember that one. Um, because what it tells me though is what we talked about. There's so much, and we can only store so much here. So I'm always like, oh, I got it all figured out. I talked to someone, I figured it all out. Now I know what our purpose is. Then I'll talk to the next person. I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. It's like it keeps, I'm like, yeah, I'll never figure it out. I think I'd have to spend 1,000, 10,000 years talking to people who've had these experiences to really get an understanding. You're putting it into human words for us to understand. And I appreciate that. But my point is, it's outside of this. So you're explaining it as a human being, and there's things that you're still learning about around it. So hopefully people have gathered a lot of info today on it, but I do appreciate you taking the time and talking to us today.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate your questions, and I appreciate being able to talk with you and your audience. And um, it's been good for me too.
That's great. I appreciate it. I always go to the audience, say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. And that's why we do this. We can get people like Philip on the show to share this knowledge. And if you want to connect with him, just reach out. But thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. So is so